Have you ever imagined what your life would be like after retirement? When you no longer have to punch a time clock, deal with performance pressure, or worry about your boss's mood, what would you want to do most? For Melody Rohrer, a 64-year-old retired nurse, the answer was simple: fulfill her dream of traveling across America with her husband. Born in 1957 in Michigan, she had dedicated her entire life to nursing, working at 2 major hospitals until her retirement in 2017. After leaving the hospital, Melody and her husband, Richard Rohrer, bought an RV and began traveling across the United States, visiting friends and exploring nature. In April 2021, they stopped at Oak Shores Park near Lake Niles, a beautiful and peaceful place. They loved it so much that they stayed for several months. Every morning, Melody would walk around the park, bringing her phone to play music while leisurely enjoying the fresh air. But on the morning of September 20th, 2021, she left the RV as usual and would never return. On Monday morning, September 20th, 2021, at 11:29 a.m., Richard called 911 to report that his wife had left for her morning walk but hadn't returned. When the dispatcher asked for details, he said his wife's name was Melody, that she had left around 8:15 to 8:30 a.m., and that she typically walked every morning, covering 6 to 8 miles. Richard said she was wearing a yellow rain jacket and shorts when she left, though he couldn't remember the color of the shorts. The dispatcher asked him to prepare a recent photo of Melody and told him to call back immediately if she returned before police arrived. At 1:15 p.m. that same day, nearly 2 hours after receiving the report, Patrol Officer Jason finally arrived at the mobile home where the couple was staying. Officer Jason reported that before meeting with Richard, he had carefully driven around the RV park but found no trace of Melody. He hoped Richard would consent to a search of their RV and asked him to recount everything that had happened that day. Richard explained that his wife was very routine-oriented. That morning, Melody had gone out for her walk at 8:15 a.m. and usually returned after about an hour. However, around 11 a.m., when he realized she still hadn't come back, he called her phone, but only reached voicemail. The phone appeared to be turned off. When asked about his wife's daily walking habits, Richard explained that Melody always carried her phone and played music while walking, but didn't use headphones so she could hear ambient sounds, especially traffic. She always walked facing oncoming traffic to easily observe approaching vehicles. Melody typically chose Route 215 and Highway 84 for her walks, though she sometimes varied her route. When asked about his wife's health and their relationship, Richard said he and Melody had been together for over 40 years with a strong, loving relationship and rarely argued. He insisted his wife would never leave voluntarily, especially since they had no close relatives or friends living near the area. Melody was also physically fit, didn't take any medications, and aside from previous thyroid surgery, was completely healthy. While Richard was speaking with Officer Jason, 2 other officers, Delquist and Everhard, also arrived. After updating each other on the situation, the 3 decided to split up and begin searching around Route 215 and Highway 84. Fortunately, just minutes after beginning the search, Officer Everhard discovered important evidence on the north side of Highway 84. In the roadside brush, he spotted a yellow rain jacket. Nearby were a shoe and a white Adidas baseball cap. Although they couldn't immediately confirm these items belonged to Melody, since the caller had confirmed she was wearing a yellow rain jacket when she left, the officers believed this was unlikely to be coincidence. Especially significant were 2 deep tire tracks visible next to the rain jacket, extending from the grass to the roadway. Based on this evidence, law enforcement suspected this might be the scene of a serious traffic accident. After quick consultation, the 3 officers decided to immediately secure the scene. Officer Everhard was assigned to guard the eastern intersection, Delquist took the western intersection, and Jason was responsible for protecting the area around the suspicious evidence while quickly calling the station to report the situation. Immediately after receiving Jason's report, county detectives arrived at the scene. Through careful examination of the surrounding area, they quickly reached several preliminary conclusions. The suspected incident location was on Highway 84, an east-west road with no emergency lanes on either side. This was a two-way road separated by double yellow lines, meaning vehicles were prohibited from passing in this area. South of Highway 84 was dense forest with complex terrain that was very difficult to access. To assist in the search, police later deployed helicopters and drones to scan the surrounding area from above. North of the highway was a large grass field extending to farmland stretching to the horizon. Near the scene, police also found several old trailers, but after checking, confirmed these had been abandoned long ago, with no residents. At the roadside area, police discovered two very clear tire tracks on the ground. Based on the direction of the tire marks, detectives determined that the suspected vehicle was traveling from east to west, then for unknown reasons suddenly swerved sharply, striking Melody while she was walking along the roadside. Continuing their careful examination of the scene, police collected a white Adidas baseball cap, marked as Evidence A, and not far away to the north, the yellow rain jacket. Along the tire tracks on the ground, at a position opposite an electrical meter box, Melody's gray athletic shoe was scattered on the grass, but only the left shoe. The right shoe was nowhere to be found in the surrounding area. At the scene, besides the collected evidence, police also marked additional items with letters and numbers for classification. Most of these were black plastic fragments believed to have fallen from the front grille area of a car. Additionally, they discovered two important pieces of evidence: an empty Michelob beer can and a Ford logo lying face down in the brush. Based on the plastic fragments and logo collected, police determined the vehicle involved was likely a Ford pickup truck. The front grille appeared to be severely damaged and deformed. To expand the search scope, law enforcement deployed drones to scan the entire surrounding forest from above. Simultaneously, the K-9 unit brought two working dogs to the scene to help track evidence. After searching for a while, both dogs had identical reactions in the same area near the accident site. Based on this reaction, K-9 officers concluded that after being struck by the vehicle, Melody had not remained at the scene but had likely been loaded into the vehicle and taken away, with her current condition, alive or dead, remaining unknown. With clues about the vehicle involved, police quickly organized teams to go door to door around the scene looking for witnesses. However, since this area was in the suburbs, surrounded by large fields with very sparse population, despite spending the entire afternoon knocking on doors, they only found very few people to interview. The only person who could provide any information was Fred, who owned a nearby farm. Fred said he saw Melody walking through this area almost every day, but didn't see her at all that day, and hadn't noticed any strangers or suspicious vehicles appearing in the area. Police then continued to interview each employee working at the farm. The results showed that everyone had arrived at work on time, and their vehicles showed no signs of collision or damage, eliminating any connection to the incident. After the witness search around the scene yielded no results, the detective in charge of the case returned to the RV park to continue questioning Richard. This time, Richard provided a more detailed timeline of that morning. He said that early that morning, Melody woke up at 6:30 a.m., while he woke up around 6:50 a.m. After waking up, Melody began preparing breakfast while he changed clothes and took their family dog for a walk around the area. After returning home, the couple ate breakfast together. While he was cleaning the table and washing dishes, Melody had finished changing clothes, put on her shoes, and left the house around 8:15 a.m. Richard said his wife always carried her phone when going out. When walking, she would play music on her phone but wouldn't use headphones, instead letting the speaker play music while moving. While the route might change depending on the day, the walking time was fairly consistent, about 45 minutes to just over an hour, and never more than 2 hours. However, at 10:49 a.m., he suddenly realized it had been more than 2.5 hours since his wife left the house, and she still hadn't returned. Worried, he immediately called Melody, but discovered the phone was turned off and only heard the voicemail message. This was very confusing to him, because Melody always charged her phone fully every night, so the possibility of a dead battery seemed unreasonable. From combining Richard's testimony with the evidence collected at the scene, detectives determined that Melody had very likely been involved in a traffic accident. The fact that her phone wasn't found at the scene further supported the theory that the person who caused the accident had taken the victim away from the incident location, along with her phone. After hearing Richard's complete account, detectives conducted a thorough search of the RV where the couple was living, as well as Richard's personal Samsung phone, but found no valuable clues. However, positive information quickly emerged. Melody also owned an iPad, and like most people, her iPad and phone were logged into the same iCloud account. Detective Frattuara logged into the iPad and tried using the Find My iPhone function to locate Melody's phone, but the results showed the device was still powered off and location couldn't be determined. When the detectives appeared disappointed, Richard suddenly mentioned that Melody loved exercise and always wore a Fitbit device when walking. This device had synced data with the iPad, and after each workout, Melody would open the iPad to check her steps, distance, heart rate, and other health metrics. This information immediately opened a new avenue of investigation for police. When opening the Fitbit app on the iPad, the detective discovered Melody had taken a total of 4,918 steps that morning. The data showed that between 8:10 and 8:45 a.m., she had continuous physical activity, indicating normal walking. However, at exactly 8:45 a.m., the device suddenly recorded all movement stopping. At 9:02 a.m., the Fitbit unexpectedly recorded light movement, but it only lasted exactly 1 minute, then completely disconnected at 9:03 a.m. Frattuara continued checking the route map on the Fitbit app, hoping to determine the last location where Melody appeared, but couldn't obtain any useful results. Police then contacted ATT to trace the phone signal, but the determined location had a very large margin of error, up to 6.2 miles, making this information nearly unusable for precise location. Not giving up, Frattuara decided to take the iPad and drive around the entire area within the radius of the last signal, hoping that if the iPad and Melody's Fitbit device were still within Bluetooth connection range, they might automatically sync and reveal the exact location. However, after driving around the entire suspected area, he still received no signal, leaving all efforts at a dead end. Just when the clues seemed to hit a dead end, AT&T suddenly provided crucial information. They reported that the system had recorded a SIM card with an IMSI ending in 601, belonging to Melody, had been unexpectedly activated at 1:54 p.m. that same day. However, notably, this SIM card was not installed in Melody's iPhone 7, with IMEI ending in 646, but was instead in a Samsung device with IMEI ending in 622. Tracing the IMEI of the Samsung phone, AT&T identified the user as Colby Martin, born March 30th, 1992, currently 28 years old. Colby resided in the town of White Pigeon, not far from the crime scene. Colby's Facebook page showed he worked for a medical supply company in the area. Continuing to expand the investigation, police retrieved vehicle registration data and discovered Colby owned a 2013 Ford F-150 pickup truck, a vehicle type that perfectly matched the fragments and evidence collected at the scene. All factors, geographic location, mobile device, stolen SIM card, matching vehicle model, indicated that Colby Martin was very likely the main suspect in the case. Without wasting time, Detective Frattuara immediately drafted paperwork for search and arrest warrants, planning to approach Colby early the next morning at his workplace. Early in the morning of September 21st, while it was still dark at 4 a.m., Detective Frattuara led a police team to the headquarters of the company where Colby Martin worked. After speaking with management, they learned that Colby usually arrived around 6 a.m. each day, but yesterday, due to a family member having COVID-19, he had been given time off and was on leave for a week at home. Theoretically, Colby would not be at the company today. Nevertheless, since police checkpoints had been discreetly positioned inside and outside the company premises, the detectives decided to wait longer in case the suspect changed his plans. By 6:15 a.m., Colby still hadn't appeared. At this point, Detective Frattuara asked two colleagues, Detective Gaylor and Detective Pentland, along with a group of officers to leave to focus on tracking Colby's phone signal while he continued to stay at the scene for surveillance. At 9:45 a.m., an unexpected breakthrough occurred. Detective Pentland discovered Colby's phone signal had appeared near 9th Avenue. After cordoning off and searching the surrounding area, he found a black Ford pickup truck parked in the parking lot near Walmart. This vehicle immediately drew attention, The front grille was completely missing, the hood was dented and showed signs of recent severe impact. From the exterior, it was clear the vehicle had been in a serious accident, closely matching the description of the suspected vehicle in Melody's case. The suspect Colby they were looking for was sleeping soundly in the truck. When detectives found him, he was still opening sleepy eyes, clearly showing fatigue. After being handcuffed, Colby was temporarily placed in the police car. Another detective, David Walker, was responsible for sitting in the police car to conduct the initial interrogation. David was a veteran detective and the station's interrogation specialist. Initially, he didn't directly ask about Melody's news, but asked about Colby's work, family, and other information. At the same time, he also shared some information about his own family, saying he also had children, etc. Through these basic conversations, Detective David tried to establish some basic trust with Colby. When talking about family and children, the detective said, "So we know when she went missing, how worried her family must be." Unexpectedly, Colby reacted to this, mentioning Purgatory State Park. David understood and continued asking if the missing woman was in this park. Colby was silent for a moment, nodded, then agreed to the detective's request, saying he could lead them there. On the deserted road leading to Purgatory State Park, Colby quietly pointed to an area of wild grass by the roadside, saying softly, "You guys can check that spot." Following his direction, the detective stepped through the brush, about 6 feet from the roadside, and discovered Melody's body lying silently among the thick grass. The subsequent autopsy results showed that Melody died instantly from extremely severe impact that caused serious liver damage, along with multiple broken ribs and spine fractures. As soon as the body was discovered, police immediately divided into groups for urgent processing. The forensic team and technicians began collecting traces and evidence around the area. Another group was assigned to interview Colby's relatives, friends, and neighbors to clarify the suspect's behavior and psychology before and after committing the crime. Detective Fratuara took on the electronic data analysis from both Colby's and Melody's phones and iPads, aiming to reconstruct the incident's progression as accurately as possible. In the interrogation, Colby gave scattered answers about his residence, relatives, and work. He said he had previously lived with his parents in Maryland and had been married for 5 years to his ex-wife named Kelly Hallen. When asked why police had come looking for him, Colby began to evade, demanding to know the questions in advance before telling his story, showing he was considering how much truth to reveal based on how much police knew. Colby claimed that since he was off work that day, he had driven around aimlessly and gotten lost. The weather was foggy, and he suddenly saw a woman appear in front of his vehicle. Although he tried to avoid her, he couldn't in time, panicked, and didn't know what to do. When telling this part, Colby's eyes avoided direct contact, showing clear signs of anxiety. After the impact, Colby admitted to putting the victim in the truck bed. When asked about vehicle damage, he said the truck was damaged from hitting a deer a few days earlier, but there was no report to prove this. At this point, police began to notice contradictions in his statement. Colby claimed that besides hitting Melody on Monday morning, he had also hit a deer on Saturday or Sunday before, calling himself really unlucky. This detail somewhat matched his ex-girlfriend's account, who said that around 5 p.m. on the day of the incident, they had talked on the phone and Colby had mentioned hitting a deer. While Colby was being interrogated at the station, Detective Gaylor was talking with his father, David. When learning his son was suspected of killing someone, David was stunned and collapsed from shock. After calming down, he said that the day before, Colby had come home saying the truck was damaged from hitting a deer. However, when checking, David saw no evidence like fur stuck to the vehicle, something that should have been there if he had actually hit an animal. He suspected his son was lying, but at the time didn't confront him because he thought it was just a minor accident and didn't want to interfere. Meanwhile, the interrogation room hadn't yet received this information from Colby's father. To them, the deer story was just an excuse. The core issue was, Colby had hit Melody, and afterward he had deliberately hidden the body and staged a false scene. During the interrogation process, Colby continued to contradict himself and evade. When asked whether he had been drinking or using drugs after hitting the victim, Colby denied both. He also said he wasn't sure where Melody had been standing on the road, only feeling she was near the driver's side, meaning quite close to his lane. Regarding direction of travel, he was vague and couldn't determine whether he was driving east or west. When asked if he had checked for signs of life after the impact, Colby claimed he had touched her and discovered she was already dead, then put the body in the truck bed. He said he had used a blue blanket to cover Melody, but police had thoroughly searched the scene afterward and found no blanket whatsoever, proving this was a lie. The question arose, if he had already admitted to causing the accident, why was Colby still lying about small details like the blanket? Detectives suspected he was trying to hide how he had handled the body after committing the crime. A more serious issue emerged when police questioned him about Melody's phone. They had discovered her SIM card had been inserted into a Samsung phone, which was Colby's phone. When asked, Colby appeared surprised and flustered, saying he didn't know why this had happened and couldn't remember what he had done with her phone. He vaguely answered that it might have been in a pocket, but couldn't confirm anything clearly. Thanks to location data, police knew for certain that the two phones had traveled together, and that was how they had quickly identified Colby as a suspect. The deeper they interrogated, the clearer it became. Colby had not only accidentally caused an accident, but had actively sought to destroy evidence, eliminate traces, and been dishonest about many crucial details. In the final phase of the interrogation, Colby continued to show evasion and concealment, even as evidence was mounting against him. When detectives asked about why the victim wasn't wearing clothing from the waist down, Colby continued to evade and didn't explain clearly. Detective David tried to maintain a calm atmosphere, only gently asking about the possibility of Colby's DNA being found on Melody. He neither confirmed nor denied, only remained silent or gave vague answers. David then excused himself to get DNA collection equipment while receiving updated information. Colby had lied about not washing his truck. While he claimed not to remember cleaning anything, camera footage from the car wash clearly recorded. The night before, Colby had thoroughly washed his pickup truck and thrown several suspicious items in the trash, including cleaning cloths, blood-stained towels, gloves, sunglasses, and a torn athletic shorts. When confronted with evidence from his father, who had cooperated with police and pointed directly to the trash can, Colby became flustered but still wouldn't clearly admit anything. He only said he might have cleaned up a little but didn't remember, then immediately denied washing the truck. The inconsistency in his statements clearly showed he was trying to cover up his evidence destruction behavior, especially regarding items that might be related to assault or body handling. When asked about the torn shorts and blood-stained towel found in the car wash trash, Colby appeared vague and inconsistent. Initially, he denied remembering any shorts, then said Melody's clothing might have torn when loading her into the vehicle, then continued to insist, "I didn't remove her clothes." However, the detectives weren't easily fooled. They pointed out that if Melody had been loaded into the vehicle while clothed, there was no reasonable explanation for the shorts being torn apart and thrown away. There was no logical detail in Colby's explanation that the pants being torn was due to impact or normal handling. Clearly, he was trying to cover up assault behavior but couldn't construct a logical story to conceal it. He also avoided directly answering whether he had thrown anything else at the car wash, only saying vaguely that this was all I can assume. Then, "I don't know anything else." Especially shocking, police had found a used condom. And notably, this condom contained DNA from both Melody and Colby. When asked about this, he was flustered and couldn't answer. The detectives now clearly understood that Colby was hiding an extremely serious truth. His admission to causing an accident while continuously denying assault, combined with the physical evidence collected, torn clothing, victim's naked state, blood evidence, showed that this case was not simply a traffic accident. According to Colby, there was heavy fog that day, the roads were rough, and Melody had suddenly appeared in his lane. However, this testimony was completely refuted by a witness named Jack. Jack lived near the scene and said he had seen Melody walking around 8:30 to 8:45 a.m. that day, in weather conditions with no rain, no fog, and dry roads. Melody was actually carrying the yellow rain jacket in her hand rather than wearing it, showing it wasn't raining at all. More importantly, Jack described Melody walking in the safe direction, walking against traffic to easily observe, a detail showing she was completely alert, experienced in walking, and never suddenly appeared as Colby fabricated. Furthermore, the actual location of the accident completely contradicted Colby's account. According to his pointing and simulation, Melody was hit while in the middle of the road. But police found no debris on the road. Instead, all the plastic fragments from Colby's front end were in the brush, about 6 feet from the road edge. So if Melody was walking on the shoulder while Colby's vehicle crashed deep into the brush, then clearly this was no longer a random accident. This was a deliberate swerve, a targeted strike. She didn't run into the road. The vehicle ran into her. When the body was discovered, her lower clothing was missing, and her underwear had been pushed up to her neck area. Police had reason to suspect this accident might not have been accidental at all, but that this deviant Colby had seen someone on the road and directly driven his vehicle to strike her. When Melody died, he didn't stop there but dragged her to a secluded location to continue the assault. A week after the incident, the examination results of Colby's Ford pickup truck were in, and it was like a mobile evidence room. Melody's blood was found everywhere, from the side running boards, rear door handles, to the passenger seat floor, the rear bed, and even a handsaw. All were DNA matched and confirmed to be Melody's blood. But that wasn't the most serious clue. In Colby's truck, police also found blue scissors. What seemed like a harmless tool, but when compared with Melody's torn shorts found in the car wash trash, police realized something horrifying. The shorts hadn't been pulled off. They had been cut. The fabric fibers were cut cleanly and neatly, not naturally torn from impact or dragging, and completely matched the cutting marks that could be made by the blue scissors. He had deliberately used scissors to cut off the victim's pants after she was dead. When examining the child's seat in the back of the truck, police discovered a used condom. The DNA test results made everyone shudder. It contained DNA from both Colby and Melody, identical to the condom sample found earlier in the car wash trash. This meant Colby had not only assaulted Melody once, but at least twice, and once occurred right in the vehicle after Melody had died. Not stopping there, the truck also contained handcuffs, clear evidence of premeditated coercive behavior, not a spontaneous action after an accident. When examining Colby's phone and computer, police digital specialists discovered, on August 24th, nearly a month before the crime, Colby had searched more than 20 times for pornographic content related to corpses. The search terms were repeatedly entered, showing this wasn't momentary curiosity, but deliberate sick obsession. Even more chilling, on the morning of September 20th, the day the murder occurred, right after leaving the company, Colby had begun searching for strange, inexplicable keywords. While Melody's body was still in his vehicle, Colby had casually searched for similar content and watched some live pornographic broadcasts. Combining the tire tracks at the crime scene with DNA on the two condoms, police believed Melody's accident was absolutely not an accident, but a cold-blooded, deviant killer who had planned carefully. Colby had long had a sick interest in corpses. That morning, seeing Melody walking, he began thinking with his lower body, floored the gas pedal, and killed Melody on the spot. Then he dragged Melody into the pickup truck, drove to a secluded location, and carried out unspeakable, horrific acts. Nearly 2 years after the incident, in June 2023, Colby Martin's trial finally began. Despite facing a series of undeniable physical evidence, Colby's lawyer still tried to argue this was only an accident, only pleading guilty to dangerous driving, while completely denying first-degree murder charges. Even the DNA evidence in the condom was defended as accidental contact. However, the detectives in charge of interrogation made clear to the court, Colby continuously changed his testimony, lied multiple times, denied stealing the phone, denied flipping the vehicle, and especially denied sexual conduct with the victim, though all evidence was already clear. The prosecution presented the 6 searches Colby had conducted from August to September 2021, DNA evidence in condoms, blood evidence in the truck, tire tracks at the scene, all painting an undeniable, horrifying picture. In July 2023, the judge sentenced Colby Martin to life in prison without parole, A cold-blooded killer had finally paid the price, and that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next video.